Hello, my name is Darri. I do witchy and pagan reviews, and this movie is one of the greatest things I've ever seen.
I swear war is Rome. Shields raised high, they stand alone. As thunder drums like fire and bone.
So, There's Something in the Barn is a 2023 movie about an American family with the name Nordheim, uh, moving seemingly back to their ancestral region, Scandinavia, specifically Norway, because basically the father has inherited a house from his family that was still there. And along with the house, they have a Nissa. So a Nissa, also known as a Tamta, is basically a house spirit. For the movie, they called it a house elf, and while the folklore goes quite a bit deeper than that, that's kind of the folklore that best fits the movie. But yeah, they often look like this, just short bearded people with red caps like these, and in modern times they're heavily associated with the Yule time. This movie, however, focuses on a lot of the negative aspects because it's a horror movie. Definitely more horror comedy, but still very much structured as if written like a horror movie. So it primarily follows a family, the father of which is Martin Starr, who you may know from the Mafia series Tulsa King or from the 2007 film Knocked Up. Amirita, I apologize, I haven't found a pronunciation for her last name, who's probably most known for playing Eerie, who was the handmaiden of Daenerys Targaryen in the Game of Thrones series. Zoe Winter Henson as the oldest child and the daughter, and Townes Burner as the youngest son, who is kind of the main focal point of this movie. And stars Kiran Shah as the main Nissa involved in this story, who you may not recognize, but you're probably decently familiar with some of the films they've been in. Now, I know Nissas is something different. I know them as Tamtas, but I love that a movie was made about this. So, the main crux of this movie is effectively this American family moving to, a foreign country, even one that they have a connection to, but even the father doesn't know any Norwegian. And there's a lot of hijinks of them getting used to the social atmosphere. Like, while exaggerated, they do show that the Nordic countries have a very different and subtler social dynamic than a lot of Americans might be used to in many times humorous fashion. And they're all adjusting to the move in various ways, and in the case of the older child, not at all. But they basically go to this new house, and the house is fine, and there's a barn attached, and the barn itself is in a lot of disrepair. And it's in the barn that the boy finds the Tamta, and while scared of it, effectively gives it a cookie, and they're friends. They go to town, they socialize a little bit, and there's a specific person who has like a Nissa house, as in this is where like Nissas go whenever they're no longer needed at the house or can no longer live in a house for a variety of reasons. And they make it a point that is very true to folklore that Nissas hate new things coming in. They hate renovations, they hate new technology coming in, and they're often very vocal about it. While this movie possibly exaggerates what the traditional folklore would be, it's it's definitely nice to see these folkloric figures not just dumbed down to Christmas elf. And so we learn that basically, while they do plan on living there a little bit, that they want to turn specifically the house that they inherited into an Airbnb. So that's going to cause a lot of problems. The family eventually ends up hosting a Christmas party, and they made friends in the region, and so this dude who's basically the equivalent of the drunk uncle stereotype is very excited. He dresses up as Santa, he does a thing, he does a lot of decorating, and needless to say, the Nissa hates it. The boy tries to warn everyone, and everyone kind of has different opinions about what exactly is going on. That, they do mention, hey, maybe the kid's just overwhelmed, we should leave. There's a lot of worries about his insanity because, he's talking about the house elves within the context of this movie. And yeah, it's points that the movie has to hit, but everyone does a good job with what they're given. And it eventually gets to the point because, as you can see, there's two Nisses in this like poster here. He calls, I believe, five other Nisses to help him terrorize this family. And throughout the movie, they kind of break the horror movie tension because there's quite a bit of that, and it does build up really nicely. But it might be awkward for some people that, like, in between all of these horror scenes, there's comedy involving the house elves. Like, none of them know what a lot of things are, and while I'm going to try not to be too spoiler heavy, one significantly funny part to me is that they find a gun, like a modern gun, and they're confused about it, leading one Nissa to shoot another. But of course, now the Nissa knows how to use the gun. Honestly, this is definitely a movie I recommend. I had a lot of fun watching it blind. I don't know how having all of this context going into the movie is going to do, but I hope I didn't like spoil it too much for you, because there's a lot to enjoy about this movie. Like, if you're really into a Christmas feely horror movie that isn't like Santa Slays or something, I think There's Something in the Barn is definitely worth looking at. All the actors do really well, including the children actors, which, sometimes gets a little rough. And I think even in this movie it gets a little rough, but at the same time it's kind of supposed to be. Like, any time where I'm like, ooh, acting is a time where perhaps that was the direction they were given. And it does kind of still work if you're not thinking about it in an overly critical eye. I just love that they actually went into a lot of the lore of the Nissa, because a lot of these movies have a tendency to bastardize it. And while I do think they dumb it down, I think they only dumb it down for the sake of what's really relevant to the movie. Like, going into the whole spiel of, yes, these are house elves, but they're also the souls of the original owners of the land. Probably not necessary. And considering this was a family estate, I can also imagine, like, grandpa is trying to kill us is would have been hard to legitimately place in the movie in a really impactful way. So I think anything that was cut out for the sake of storytelling, which, yeah, especially for, something not trying to be overly historically or folklorically accurate in any way, it's fine. So yeah, if you're into the more, comedy side of horror films, I think you'll at least have a good time and you'll chuckle. I know I said this was the greatest movie I've ever seen, but I am well aware that I have very particular taste, and most of it is I love dumb things. Another thing to note is they don't necessarily go into like really any pagan aspects to anything. Like, it's just kind of, this is folklore that is known and is part of the culture. So yeah, they're not really going into, you know, Norse paganism or anything like that when they go into this, which again is fine. A lot of the modern interpretations of Nisses are more along those lines anyway. So, as I've said, and you're probably tired of hearing me say, go check it out. I had a good time. Maybe you will too. Thank you all for watching.